All right, let's talk about the sky. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this hidden architecture that's all around us, this invisible system of rules and boundaries that honestly is the only reason every flight you take is so incredibly safe.
I think it's a question we've all asked ourselves. You look up, you see these planes crisscrossing the sky, and you just kind of wonder, how is it not total chaos up there? Well, I'll tell you, it's not a miracle. It's a system, and it's a really, really well-designed one.
Because here's the secret. The sky isn't empty space at all. The best way to think about it is like this massive, invisible city right above our heads. It has its own highways, its own intersections, and a really strict set of traffic laws that every single pilot has to follow. So let's jump in and see how it all works.
Okay, so the very first thing you need to get your head around is the most fundamental rule of this invisible city. The entire sky is basically split into two very different realms.
And this main division, it's actually pretty simple. You've got controlled airspace, where air traffic control, or ATC, is the boss. What they say goes. Pilots have to follow their instructions. Then you have uncontrolled airspace. Here, ATC has no real authority. Any guidance they might give you is just, well, it's just advice. It's kind of like the difference between a freeway with traffic cops and a wide open country road.
So let's start where planes do, on the ground. We're going to build our way up through the layers of airspace around airports, which pilots often call the airport pyramid. At the very bottom of our pyramid, you'll find Class D airspace. This is the zone you'd see around a typical smaller local airport. It's busy enough that it needs a control tower, but not so swamped with traffic that it needs anything more complicated. So what does this Class D space actually look like? Well, just picture a simple cylinder. It's usually about 4 to 5 nautical miles wide, and it goes from the ground right up to about 2,500 feet. On a pilot's chart, you'd see it marked with dashed blue lines. But here's the key rule. You can't just fly in. A pilot must get on the radio and establish two-way contact with the tower. They have to call in, and the tower has to answer back.
All right, moving one step up the pyramid, we get to Class C airspace. This is for the busier airports, the kind you'd find serving medium to large cities. They're dealing with a lot more traffic and offer more advanced radar services to help pilots out.
And you can see right away things get a little more complex. Class C has this two-tiered shape, which you'll see on a chart as solid magenta lines. There's a 5-mile core right around the airport, and then a wider 10-mile shelf on top of that, reaching up to about 4,000 feet. The rule to get in is the same. You got to make that radio call, but the whole layered structure is designed to manage that higher volume of planes more effectively.
And now, we've reached the top of our pyramid, Class B. This is the big one. This is the super complex, custom-designed airspace that protects the nation's 37 busiest airports. We're talking about places like Phoenix, LAX, and Chicago O'Hare.
Pilots have the perfect way to describe Class B airspace. It's not just a simple cylinder, it's a whole series of stacked layers that get wider and wider the higher you go. They call it an upside-down wedding cake. And that shape is totally custom, designed to funnel all those incoming and outgoing flights safely.
You'll see it on the charts as solid blue lines, and it can go all the way up to 10,000 feet or more. But here's the biggest difference, the real game changer. You don't just call up to get in. A pilot needs explicit clearance from ATC. They literally have to hear the magic words, "You are cleared into the Class Bravo airspace." Without that specific permission, you stay out, period. And there's a serious reason for this strictness. It was born from tragic mid-air collisions in the past. It's all about making sure every single plane in that sky is known and safely separated.
So, let's do a quick recap of our airport pyramid. You can see how everything scales up, right? From the simple radio call you need for a small Class D airport, all the way to that explicit must-have clearance for the busiest Class B hubs. And those chart symbols, dashed blue, solid magenta, solid blue, they're like a pilot's cheat sheet, telling them the rules of the road at a single glance.
Okay, we've covered the zones right around the airports, but what about all that space in between them? Well, this is where our invisible city gets its highways, the routes that connect the whole system together.
And that's where Class C airspace comes in. I want you to think of Class C as the connective tissue of the sky. It's basically the catch-all category for controlled airspace. It fills in all the gaps between the airport zones, and it forms the highways that pilots on instrument flight plans use to get from city to city. It is almost everywhere.
So, what happens where there's no controlled airspace at all? Well, that's Class G. This is the only type of uncontrolled airspace out there.
If all the other classes are the city and its highways, Class G is the open country. It usually starts right at the ground in really remote places, and there are no traffic cops. ATC has no authority here whatsoever.
Now let's look way, way up. Starting at 18,000 feet and going all the way to 60,000 feet, you have Class A airspace. These are the exclusive high-altitude superhighways. This is where the airliners live. Up here, every single flight is under strict ATC control and must be on an instrument flight plan. No exceptions. Okay, so now we have our map. We've got our different airport zones, we've got our highways, but just like any city on the ground, our invisible city also has special districts, with some very specific and often very strict keep-out signs. This is what we call special use airspace. And while there are a few different types, we're going to focus on 4 of the most critical ones that pilots are always on the lookout for: prohibited areas, restricted areas, military operation areas, and something called a TFR.
Let's start with the most serious one: prohibited areas. I mean, the name really says it all. These areas protect extremely sensitive national security sites. Think the White House or Camp David. For pilots, entry is absolutely 100% forbidden. There are no exceptions. You just don't go there.
The other zones are also all about safety. Restricted areas, for example, keep civilian planes away from hazardous stuff like missile launches or artillery fire. You can't enter when they're active. Then you have military operation areas, or MOAs. These are basically designed to separate us from military training exercises, high-speed jets doing their thing. And finally, you've got temporary flight restrictions, or TFRs. Think of these as pop-up restricted zones that can appear for things like a presidential visit, a big football game, or even over a wildfire.
So, I think the big takeaway here is this. The sky is not just some big, empty space. Not at all. It's a carefully, meticulously managed resource. And this entire invisible architecture, this whole system, exists for one main reason: to keep everyone safe, both the people flying in the air and all of us here on the ground.
So the next time you're outside and you look up and see a plane tracing that white line across the sky, are you still going to see just a tiny dot in an empty expanse? Or are you going to see a vehicle expertly navigating its way through this complex, invisible city of highways and rules and neighborhoods? Something to think about. Thanks for watching.